Uh, hey y'all. I am making an effort to open up a space for some sticky conversation. And I felt it necessary. This hasn't been like pre-planned or the way I usually write something out. The most prep I've done for this is just like combining thoughts and then saying a prayer before I pressed let's go live. So, but I think this is really important. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because it's come to mind a lot. I'm going to give some backstory to this. It's come up a lot, but I've never said anything. And I want to be proactive. And I want to not just think about stuff, but actually do something to benefit people. So, last night I watched the United States versus Billie Holiday. Woo. Oh my gosh. It was intense. It was a lot. It was no joke. Nothing was held back. And it was a sheesh. It was a learning moment for me as a black woman and realizing how much I didn't know about her story and what she went through and the way America came for this woman, just like came hard and was determined to tear her down, to tear her message down. For those of you that don't know, how do I even encapsulate who Billie Holiday was? She was a phenomenal jazz musician and activist for black people, but she's perhaps most well known for her song Strange Fruit, which is about the lynchings in the South and this metaphor for the lynchings as black lives, human beings being strange fruit on a tree. And the song is extremely visceral and powerful, and it gives a very distinct image. And what I didn't know, I knew a little bit like, yeah, the government didn't like that, but I didn't know the government actively pursued to tear this woman's life apart because she was letting the world know, she was painting a picture for white people that this is actually happening. This is what people are doing to black bodies. And the government didn't want that. They don't want the truth out, right? So, um, with that considered, like the culmination of the fact that I myself, as a black person who I think all us black folk are in our own ways professionally black, right? I was humbled by the fact that I didn't know this part of her story, but it also made me wonder if me as a black woman did not know this, how, this perception of how much white people don't know about black stories and the truth of those stories and the rawness and the ugliness, of especially our history and what really occurred, right? And I'm reminded of that every time I watch a movie about our history. There's this ambivalence because there's so much that we've seen and we know as a people that can make it hard to have to look at that. And in some ways like, that re-traumatization aspect of it. And then there's the other part of like, but we have to remember what we're fighting for. We have to remember what we experienced. And something that stands out to me again is I wonder how much of these movies are white people watching, because it's like for the most part, we usually know and have an idea of these stories, right? But, I wonder, are white people feeling the need to watch these movies and really understand and see these pictures, these visceral depictions of horror and tragedy, and the importance of doing so? Because as much as we speak, as much as we try to articulate what happened, as much as we say lynching, is a far cry different from seeing a lynching. And in this day of age, thank God there aren't many of us who can say they've seen that, right? But when you watch these movies and these amazing creators recreate those moments, it hits you differently. And I found myself, and I often find myself, thinking about some friends and people I know that detach themselves from like anything with foul language or anything with sexual activity and things of that nature, and how a lot of these movies include all of that because these creators are creating a story, a whole story, because they want you to be there. They want you to put yourself in that place and in that experience. And also, like specifically, many of my Christian friends come to mind who have respectfully very strict boundaries on what they watch. And I think my ask is that you consider, and everyone considers, the cost benefit analysis of what you can be missing out on, the education you could be sacrificing by saying, I don't want to see any cursing or no sexual behavior or, any nakedness or however you want to put it. And not to say a person has to sacrifice their values, but I think there's space to press fast forward or skip a scene. And I mean, I've done that myself when something just doesn't quite sit well and I'm like, this is getting a little too real, I just press fast forward. And I imagine, like with this movie in particular, and this movie gave me kind of like some of the same vibes as Color Purple, and sadly just a lot of our stories, but like how much I would not understand about this woman's struggle and experience that I haven't been able to get from textbooks or articles had I said, oh, there's too much of this, too much of that, I can't watch this movie. And I wonder how many of my friends have missed out on valuable education into Black culture, Black history, Black experience because they read the R rating and said, oh no, you know what I mean? And I think I'm asking you to, I feel that you can't say, I want to be a part of the change, and then deliberately choose not to learn about why there needs to be a change. And you can read all the books you want, but at the end of the day, it's a blessing that we have creators and artists who can create these pictures for us and put us in those extremely uncomfortable moments, because that's where we learn and that's where we're able to actually feel the agony and the hurt and understand the complexity also, because there's conversations that take place that we can't explain when we're just trying to sum up, oh, this is what happened to the great so-and-so who led this and that. No, when you're able to see that moment, see that scene, see that moment where their trust was betrayed or when they were framed, or see that response, it's just completely different. And in many ways, it like straight up hurts my heart when a friend who is trying to actively be a part of the change in our social structures and our experiences as people of color say something like, I won't read that book because it's written by a gay person, or I only prefer to read articles from Christians, or these are just specifics that have popped up, but anything like that, because I feel like at the end of the day, it's your responsibility, and if we're thinking of people of faith, it's your responsibility to be able to navigate what you internalize spiritually. And just because someone doesn't share your point of view or share your culture or your background or your upbringing, it doesn't invalidate what they say or their knowledge or their education. And you're doing yourself a disservice by limiting yourself to the bubble of people that agree with you and are in your own spectrum simply because these other people are different. And I believe you're smart enough to know if you're reading something, whether that is something that you can internalize and accept as truth and beneficial to you or not. But to completely wipe it out because of a difference in approach or belief or perspective is not serving you. And it doesn't serve what your supposed goal is. And I think everyone has, their own set of boundaries. And that's okay. That's good. We all need that. But I just feel that when you set such fixed boundaries and standards as I'm not even going to consider this type of information because of the person that wrote it, it's not healthy. And again, coming back to the movies, I think I feel so passionately about this because it was such an eye-opener. The fact that I had the ability to watch the gift of Lee Daniels creating this movie that showed this other side of her story that we aren't taught. And one, how about the fact that it's just this Black history is not truly taught in America. So when these creators make movies depicting these moments that can't be articulated in the same way in any other type of art form, you have to take advantage of that. And when you ignore it because there's sex, because there's a gay person in it, because there's so much cursing, consider, maybe there's, and this might come off judgy, take it as you will, I'm open to conversation and correction, but I think there's space to consider yourself. And why is it so hard to balance that, or to be able to see that and not feel like, oh, all of a sudden that's me, where's the separation? And again, that's a conversation about one's own boundaries, but like having grown up and heard these oral histories and also predominantly oral histories about what our people have been through. Like, I don't have, here's the dirty word, I don't have the privilege of separating myself from these experiences, from these horrors. And I think certain suggestive, this little pick and choosing, oh, this person wrote it and that person said this and this couple is doing that, I think it's a cop-out. And I think you're going to miss a giant part of an education on what we as a community are fighting for equity-wise right now, and socially, and within the entire sphere of change and social change. You're missing out on a giant education just because you have your own boundaries that you've set in place. And so my ask is that basically I'm saying, watch these movies. Watch these movies that pull those horrifying images and crazy stories that are just beyond imagination, because if you haven't seen it, it is beyond your imagination, and that limits your ability to empathize. And when you're able to see these pictures and these images, it hits you differently, friend. So I'm like begging you to sit aside whatever boundary, or dare I say bias, or whatever is keeping you from engaging in these sorts of works, to perhaps do some self work before you watch it. But definitely watch these movies. And if you must, okay, we're adults, we know what sex looks like. Go on and fast forward through it, even though these artists and directors and producers even include intention with those scenes. For example, in the Billie Holiday movie, one sex scene made a clear depiction between how her childhood trauma has influenced the way she accepts love, and like the difference between making love and having sex between different partners that she had. And and so you could clearly see that there was an intention in the creation of that scene. However, you know, that isn't such a giant part of her story that if you skipped it, you would miss out on so much more. So what I'm trying to say is, like, yeah, there's space for you to honor your boundaries and what makes you comfortable, but also, like, don't run away from these truths just because, you live a certain way or have a certain ideal, because just seeing it does not make that you. And you should have the strength to be able to separate. And and that might sound judgy. Maybe you don't. Maybe this is like a really soft spot, a weakness or something. But I want you to know at least how much you're missing out, because these conversations are important. These stories are so important to understanding why we're mad as hell, why we're hurt, why our people are traumatized. And goodness, like, gosh, what sticks out for that movie for me, and this isn't like a new scene or anything, but it's just, it really makes you think and puts you in the space, is when there was there was a lynching, and this little girl, the father is trying to hold the mom's body up. He's standing on a chair and, like, trying to hold her. She's long since passed, it's clear, but he's holding her, and the children are watching and screaming in agony, "Daddy, get mama off the tree. Daddy, get mama," and goodness, the agony in their voices. It was just, whoo, oh Nelly. It was just insane. And so it's those moments that outweigh the cursing, outweigh how many times they say nigga. It outweighs the sex scenes. You see what I'm saying? There's so many more of those moments that are beneficial to a person's growth and understanding and empathy that people are missing out on. And I don't want to just like comfort Christians, but that's just the example personally for me that's come up as a Christian, knowing that some people just totally dismiss entire books, movies, articles, etc., just because the person who wrote it or created it is different in one way or another, or holds different moral values, etc. So that's my call to action. Please watch these movies. Watch The Color Purple. Watch these movies that share our stories in a very honest and raw way, because every medium serves a purpose, and these movies just paint such thoughtful, clear pictures that forces you to connect. It forces you to be there, just like the song Strange Fruit forced the culture to address lynching, to see lynching. And the sad thing is that, I mean, this is a tangent, the law didn't even pass, and et cetera, but it's the fact that people were waking up, right? People's eyes were being opened. And we're in this moment today where a lot of people are feeling that they're waking up, And I want to say, don't claim to be waking up when you're taking the privilege of ignoring what the fight is for. Okay, so, whew, I said it, I meant it, it's out there. If you want to discuss it further, feel free. But yeah, that's my ask. Go watch those movies. If it makes you uncomfortable, if it makes you blush, press fast forward. It's that easy. But you need to get the main picture. And sometimes you can only get it through a movie. Okay, I'm gonna go by pressing the X button because I'm still not used to this. So now I see it. Thanks for listening, y'all. I see y'all down there. Oh, I don't know. I never do a live thing. If someone wants to say something and I like reply, I'll give a moment for that. But I just appreciate you listening. And this light's making me hot. So yeah, feel free to hit me up. Or I think I can save this and you could put something in the comments if you want. Whoo-wee. That felt good. All right, y'all. Lots of love and peace. See ya.